All right, we are on air. It is Thursday, February 19th. I'm also supposed to ask anyone who joins the meeting to mute yourselves if you have any potentially noisy background noises or computer robot noises or anything like that. But it looks like you already all are, so good job, everyone. Good job reading the agenda. We are doing a check-in meeting for Backdrop CMS to talk about all of the stuff that we're working on, hopefully in order of priority. At the beginning of this meeting, we have a section usually reserved for updates from the Project Management Committee. We don't have any updates for you this week. It's been business as usual for the last few weeks here, so we'll just carry on. A quick update on community growth. Nate, do you want to take this over since you're responsible for our new contrib maintainers?
Sure. So things still kind of just rolling along, lots of new contrib modules coming in. 25 total contributed authors are now in the Backdrop contrib group, and 50 total projects have been ported or written for Backdrop, and there are a handful more in the pipeline, such as Andy, for example, who's in our Hangout again, but is still queued up in the review process for getting added to the contrib group. If you're interested in joining the Backdrop contrib group, you can visit it at github.com/backdrop-contrib. And in the README there's information about how to, actually, I guess it's not really in the README. In the description there, you can get information about how to join the group. Basically, we do a really minor review, checking to make sure that you maintain history from Drupal 7, that you include a license file, and that you include a README file, basically is all the requirements that we have. And then you can get access and you can add or port or do whatever you want into the Backdrop contrib group. Let's see, we also have some peripherals around integrating with the contrib group, but I'll talk about that later in the peripheral section.
Soon. So we also have a couple of updates on things that aren't Backdrop itself that we're working on. The first and foremost is Drush. I love Drush. I use Drush every day for all of my Drupal sites, and I don't know that I'd be super happy with Backdrop not having something like Drush. And we've got one, I suppose, have one live site running on Pantheon right now. And most of Pantheon's dashboard integration uses Drush. So things like automated backups, clearing the caches from the Pantheon dashboard, all that stuff doesn't work and won't work until we get Drush support. So I opened a bunch of tickets on Pantheon saying, like, Backdrop sites are having these problems, and it's fine. Like, my live site still gets, I can run update.php and I can make my own backups, but I want it to all work like Pantheon usually works. So I opened a bunch of tickets with the dashboard saying, like, what is the process for getting this done? And they basically assigned all my tickets to Matt, who was in Colombia last week for DrupalCon Colombia, but he still wrote me back and said, hey, I just got all these tickets assigned from you. Here's my plan for how we're going to deal with Backdrop sites. I'm going to set up a special sandbox where we can run whatever version of Drush we want, and anyone who sets up a Backdrop site, we can drop in the sandbox. So as long as you can work on getting some version of Drush ready, you being, the community at large, we can put whatever you want there and make the Backdrop sites work on Pantheon, which made me super happy. So then I checked in the Drush issue queue, and Greg Anderson has been doing a bunch of work on kind of abstracting the Drupal out of Drush, and so he's got a bunch of pull requests against Drush that will make Drush easier to use, and then we have a couple of people who are also interested in making Drush work with Backdrop that can use Backdrop as a test case for the new abstraction of Drush. So it looks like there's been a lot of progress happening in Drush, which is great, and there's a lot of support from Pantheon on how we can actually get the new version of Drush working with Backdrop when it's ready. So I think that all sounds super exciting. And we also have a short-term way to use a Backdrop-specific version of Drush, where if you have a version of Drush that you have hacked to work with Backdrop, you can drop it directly into your project root, and Drush will automatically look for that version of Drush instead of using the one that's installed per user on your system. So I think that short-term we can do that. Long-term, we'll just get the version of Drush to recognize an include file that will ship with Backdrop that will tell it where it is. So I think we have both the short-term solution for using Drush on your Backdrop sites this month, which will be great. Maybe not this month, next month. And then we have a longer-term, the next official version of Drush. Maybe not Drush 7, but some soon version of Drush will contain Backdrop support. So I'm super excited about all of the progress that's happening there. with Drush and Backdrop. And then Nate has been doing a bunch of work on updates and packaging. Do you want to talk a little bit about update server and GitHub integration and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So this is tied into the major site, or the main site itself. Backdropcms.org is almost fully ported to Backdrop itself, so our own site will be running our own software, which is always nice. You can see the new site at, unfortunately, it has to be https://new.backdropcms.org. It basically is exactly like the old site, only it's on Backdrop. So the progress there is that we have some additional modules on there that you can't really see yet, but one of them is integration with GitHub. And the very first thing that we've got going is we've made a packager script so that when you make a new release in the Backdrop contrib group, once we launch the new site, what will happen is a webhook will be fired to the main site from GitHub, and then the backdropcms.org website will then check out the zip file from the release, unzip it, read through all the .info files, add in all of the version information like the Drupal.org packager script does, and then compress it again, and then upload it to the release on GitHub. So GitHub will continue to host our packaged releases, but now what will happen is we'll check out the zip, modify it, and then upload up a new one. And then that will be the copy that we'll start linking to from backdropcms.org. So basically, we have a packager now, which is great. And so as soon as the new site launches, we'll wire that up and get the packager running on all contrib projects, which will facilitate the update status operations later. So first things first, get the version information into packages, and then we'll continue working on making update status work right after that. So that's that. Oh, you're muted, Jen, still.
Even Google was like, you should unmute yourself if you want to talk. Sorry, guys. So yeah, I'm super excited about all the progress we've been making on the Backdrop primary website. I think we are probably days away from launching that. We just need to get a little design review and make sure we get some spam protection on that submit your logo form we've got on there, and then I think it'll be good to go. So that's super exciting. We've got GitHub integration. Did you want to talk at all about the service, Nate, or do we want to skip that?
You mean a GitHub service?
Yeah.
No, there's not really any progress on that. I mean, getting the Backdrop contrib group set up and working with webhooks is kind of the first step, and we'll maintain the most control over the webhooks in that group. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to test it, make sure that it's all working while we can still kind of change it, and then we'll work on the service after that, because the service is the concept that any GitHub project anywhere, like not just within the Backdrop contrib group, could register projects on backdropcms.org as well. And that is in the plan, but it's less priority than getting the Backdrop contrib group figured out.
Okay. So that's lower priority. Maybe I should move it down lower on the list, but we'll see about that next week. Okay, so other things we have going on, our API site is still ticking along. It's working really well as an API site. It added some great improvements, I think, 2 weeks ago to the way the search works, so that it'll autocomplete function names or search content. So if you type in, for example, like a function name that you would have used in Drupal 7 and it's not in Backdrop, it'll find the change record that references that function name, and it'll tell you exactly what you should change the function to, which I think is super helpful. The theme is currently running a fancied up version of Bartik. We're working on a new theme. It's going to take some version of the theme that's on our primary website that is lower priority. It's working really well the way it is now, so we're going to leave it until we get all of the more urgent stuff done, like our primary website, GitHub integration, modules, listing, stuff like that all comes first. But I've been super happy with all of the documentation on the API site. I've been super happy with the way that change notices are working. I think we have like 2 change notices that are left to be created. All of them could use a review. If anyone finds any problems with any of the documentation or anything on there, we could definitely use help reviewing and updating them. So go ahead and create issues in the GitHub issue queue associated with the API site, and we will take care of them. If you can't find that, just put them in any queue, and we'll try and direct you to where that should be. But yeah, I think the API site is working really well. For our primary website, we have the new version that Nate talked about. What we're working on next over there is the ability for people to post a node about a project, so a module, theme, or a layout. And then we're going to try and give them a way to search those things, and also ways you can add links to support queues, documentation, and the actual source code. So we will be able to pull in anything that's part of the Backdrop Contrib group, but anything that is not part of the Git Contrib group can also be added by creating a node and filling out those fields yourself. So we'll try and get that up soon too, so that people can host the code wherever they would like. We also have a forum going and a subreddit, which I must admit I was a little skeptical at the beginning, but it is totally working. Everyone's hanging out on the forum, asking questions, topicing. New people are popping in. I think it's going really well over there, so I've been really happy with how it goes. The only thing I had issues with a couple of weeks ago is I wanted to post an image, and instead I had to post like a link to an image rather than just putting the image directly in the comment. I don't know if there's a solution for that on Reddit. If anyone has one, I would love to hear about it. Otherwise, I think everything over there is going swimmingly, and I would love to continue using that as our forum software so we don't have to build our own. Okay, so upcoming releases for Backdrop. We have a couple of bug fixes that are in. We have a couple more, well, handful more bugs in the issue queue that could use to be fixed, but I don't think we have anything that is a super urgent priority for releasing, so we'll just keep cranking through little changes like that until we have one. Obviously, if a security release comes out, either for Drupal or for Backdrop, we will evaluate those and release as needed. Otherwise, we're just going to keep looking at the bug fixes that come up and decide how important they are and how soon those releases need to come out for Backdrop. We have a minor release coming up on May 15th. That will be Backdrop 1.1, and more releases after that. So for the 1.1 release, we have 4 things that are kind of important. A rich text editor, which I think is probably the most important but also the hardest to do, is something that Backdrop is severely lacking right now. The plan for putting a rich text editor into Backdrop Core is going to look a lot like the plan that put a rich text editor into Drupal 8 Core. So we're going to use CK Editor. We're going to add a module that you will be able to turn on or off that will give you the editor or not the editor. But all of the integration, instead of having a module called editor like Drupal 8 did, between the filter system, which is the filtering on the back end, and the WYSIWYG system, which is the filtering on the front end, will all be integrated directly into filter module. So we'll have filter module changes, and we'll have a CK editor module that will let you turn the editor on and off. And so if we have anyone who wants to work on that, we do have an example of how that works in Drupal 7 with the WYSIWYG CK editor module. We are not going to be porting WYSIWYG to Backdrop. Instead, all of the integration is going to happen directly with filter module. So if we have anyone who wants to work on rich text editor and core, the first step is not starting with WYSIWYG. The first step is kind of starting with what Drupal 8 did. I don't know how helpful it's going to be to look at their code to figure out what that was. It might be more helpful to look at, like, install Drupal 8 and see what it does, like, functionally, and say, oh, you know, the edit form has changed in this way, and then make those same changes to Backdrop that way. And we have some code that was written for Drupal 7 in the WYSIWYG CK editor module that might be a good starting point for that. But this is the kind of change that requires some significant, like, architecture thinking. It's not as simple as porting something, so it's going to require a significant amount of focus and someone who's, like, dedicated to cranking it out. So it's a hard thing to do in your spare time, but it is really important, and we do want to get it done. And if it doesn't get done by 1.1, we need to get it in by 1.2. So that's our plan for rich text editor. We have other things that are going to be going into core in 1.1, like token module and path auto module. And those two things do start by porting token and path auto to Backdrop. And so we currently have a version of token and a version of path auto that are now working and happy for Backdrop CMS, and they're in the Backdrop contrib repository. And so the next step towards getting those in core would be looking at the way the interfaces work and deciding if those interfaces belong where they are in the contrib module or if they should be more tightly integrated with core. So for example, path auto module should probably not be a separate module in core. It should probably be part of path. And so trying to figure out where the settings form should live and that sort of stuff is the path forward for that, and then figuring out how to integrate that into our existing path module. Would be how to get that in. And then token, we already have token support in core. We just need to figure out where the UI is going to live. Like, is that need to be a separate module called token UI? Or can we just move all of the tokens into where they go and then put token module somewhere else? So we need someone to kind of think kind of bigger picture about how these things should be integrated now that they're working. And that's the progress towards getting those two things in core. Another thing we want to get done for the 1.1 release is getting the administration for Backdrop to feel different from the administration for Drupal. Right now, you install it, you get the 7 theme, it looks the same, it feels the same, and people aren't going to be able to tell the difference. Am I running a Backdrop site or a Drupal site? Unless you go to the layout interface. So what we'd like to do is make it feel different. We have a great style guide that we've been working on that sets Backdrop's brand a little bit apart. And all we need to do is figure out how to implement those changes. We have until May 15th, which I think means we can get most of the way, if not all of the way done in the next few months. So I think that's looking pretty good. And then we'll start to have a product that feels different from Drupal. There are, of course, a ton of other issues in our issue queue that are not necessarily slated for the 1.1 release. As far as new features, I don't think we're planning on adding any new features that aren't in this list, but if something gets done early and we want to put it in, I think that's realistic. Although if people are working on new features, I would love to see them work on these because these are our priorities. However, any other changes, user experience improvements, developer experience improvements, tiny bug fixes, other terminology updates, anything that we can get done between now and May 15th can go into that release. So if there's, you run into a bug and you want to fix it, or you think an interface is confusing and you want to fix it, there is ability to get those done too. So as you're building websites with Backdrop, as I'm sure you all are, you're going to run into a bunch of little snags. Obviously, this is new software. I would love to get as many of those snags smoothed out before 1.1 as possible. Obviously, we have a minimal number of people using it today. As time goes forward, we're going to get more and more people using it, so trying to make that experience as positive for all of the new people in the future, I think, is a good goal for us to have. So issues in our queue for user experience are tagged with, in the issue title, square brackets and the letters UX. Developer experience is the same, it's square brackets and DX. The developer experience issues are a little trickier to fix because we aren't allowed to change any APIs now that 1.1 is out. So if what we need to do is add a wrapper function for backwards compatibility, we can do that. If what we need to do is change the order of arguments passed into a function, we can't do that anymore. So it's good to identify issues that you feel like are creating a bad developer experience or could be improved. But not all of them are going to get into 1.1. Some of them might be tagged as 1.2. But it's good to have them in the queue so we know what they are. And if you put in an issue that we think we can change in 1.1, we'll do it. If it's an issue we can't, we'll change the milestone to 1.2 so you'll know this isn't something we can change without an API break. And it could be that we tag it with 1.2 and someone makes a recommendation of how to do it without breaking APIs, and we can move it back to 1.1. But definitely let us know if you're working with Backdrop and you feel like there's room for improvement. We want to know all the problems and all of the great things too, but you don't have to create issues for those. We usually have sprints. Every Thursday is Backdrop Day. We meet in IRC. Our channel is Pound Backdrop if you are an IRC nerd and like to hang out online. There's usually a bunch of people in there after this meeting, sometimes before as well. If you want to get someone's attention, go ahead and type their name. And most people's IRC clients are configured to make a noise at them if their name is mentioned. Sometimes I've been in there and people have been like, is anyone in here? We're all there. We're just not necessarily listening. So if you want to get someone's attention, go ahead and mention us. And that'll be a guaranteed way to get someone to respond. We also have some upcoming events that are backdrop friendly. In particular, Sand Camp, the San Diego Drupal Camp, is going to be coming up in a week and a half here. It is going to be, I think, Thursday through Saturday. And on Thursday, we have our first backdrop training, which is very exciting. We're going to be doing a half-day training on basics of backdrop. And I actually talked to a couple people that were like, oh, I really wanted to come to Sand Camp so I could do the backdrop training, but I'm not going to be able to do it. And I had to sadly admit, like, kind of the point of backdrop is that you shouldn't really need a training. Like, it's supposed to be the same. But there are some significant differences, layouts and CMI among them. And so I think people who are interested might want to sit in that training. It's free. It's a good kind of intro, bring you up to speed on stuff too. So I'm really excited about the training. I'm looking to hear what people think of it. And then Nate and I will also be doing a session at the camp. So if you don't want to give up a half a day on Thursday, you will be at the camp. If you want to hear about backdrop, we're going to talk about it on the weekend. So definitely, we're looking forward to being there, getting some more sunshine. It's sunny here, not sunny in the rest of the world, but it'll definitely be sunny in San Diego. So it'll be a fun time. And then in March, we're going to Mid-Camp in Chicago, which should be the opposite of sunny. I'm not sure whether it's going to be snowy or just cold, but it is not going to be a beautiful San Diego environment for sure. But it will be backdrop friendly. So Nate and I will be there. You can come talk to us at the bar. You can talk to us at the sprint. We're trying to organize a sponsorship of the sprint. I think it's going to be mostly a Drupal 8 sprint, but Nate and I will be there, so we'll be sprinting on backdrop on Sunday. So hopefully they'll decide that they want our money, and we'll be able to sponsor that. But we'll see. We haven't heard back from them yet on that. And we have some calendars if you guys are interested in where we're going to be, or if you are going to be attending an event and want to talk about backdrop. You can add that to our calendar too. And we have links to the Google iCal feeds, both in our subreddit, if you want to grab them there, or in the weekly meeting agenda for this meeting. So we've got two calendars. One of them is for Drupal events that are backdrop friendly, and one of them is for just these weekly meetings. So if you want to be notified of when these meetings are, we have this meeting every Thursday at the same time, and we have one meeting that's a design-specific meeting that starts an hour earlier, but it's every other Thursday. So if you're interested in either of those things, the calendar is available for those as well. All right, let's see. Other things. That's the end of the agenda. The only thing I have on here is there's a Drupal watchdog that's going to be coming out at the same time as DrupalCon LA that will have both an article that I've written that's kind of a very in-depth comparison of the differences between Backdrop and Drupal 7, so talking mostly about CMI and layouts and how your code should be different from one to the other. And then Nate has a kind of a more general FAQ on backdrop stuff, like how do things work in backdrop, things we get asked a lot. I think those are both going to be super helpful for people who haven't been following along with what we've been doing all the time, and I'm looking forward to them coming out. But that's all I have for today's meeting. There's a bunch of you here, so I want to see, first of all, if there's anything you guys think we should talk about every week, or secondly, if there's anything you want to bring up this week that we should chat about today.
I have a question. This may be somewhat maybe forward, but do we have plans for third-party libraries yet? Drupal used the libraries module, and then some people said it's too big, it's too heavy, we should not do that. And this would be, you know, both jQuery plugins, PHP, library code, anything that Contrib module might include. Is there a think tank on that?
We do have an issue where we have been thinking about that, and there's been a lot of back and forth, and I must admit, I come across this all the time, and every time I revisit the issue, I'm like, Nate, what are we going to do about libraries? And he has some very strong feelings, so Nate, maybe you can update us on your thoughts on Backdrop's path forward of whether we should be porting libraries module to Backdrop, since we don't have anything in core yet, or whether we should be handling it differently.
Yeah, so I tried to find the issue. I'll post it in the chat or in IRC after the Hangout is done. But we do still have an issue that is a core issue that's like, what should we do about organizing our libraries? And I think the one thing that we know for sure that's a good idea is just organizing the MISC directory into some kind of libraries directory in core. But that's really just reorganization. Like how we actually manage multiple modules needing to depend on the same library is still kind of a discussion that's happening. Yeah, thanks, Jen, for the link. That's still happening. For now, though, definitely the easiest thing to do is, because we don't have any license restrictions on our code, Drupal.org specifically said you can't bundle your libraries in your projects because, just because it's the policy, basically. They just didn't want external libraries in their projects. But on GitHub, we have no such restrictions, and in the contrib group, we don't even have that sort of policy. So for now, the easiest thing to do for certain is if your module depends on a library, especially a JavaScript library, and you are kind of like the canonical module for that thing. Let's say you had like a Flex Slider module, and you wanted to bundle the Flex Slider library, then that would be the easiest thing to do, is just include it right in the repository. So for now, probably just bundle. Long term, yeah, we'll need to figure out what to do about libraries. We may end up with some kind of ported libraries API, but I kind of like the simplicity of not having all modules need to download another module for the time being. So I don't know. I would say let's discuss it in issue 2. It's issue 159.
And there's also a user experience benefit there too, where if you are the Flex Slider module, it's hard to say, okay, download this module and then go to this arbitrary link, which changes every 6 months, and download this package, and you don't know which version it is, and you don't know, once you unpack it, you might have to rename it. There's kind of like a big stumbling block there to installing third-party libraries. And if we can find a way to say, you install the Flex Slider library, everything you need is packed with it, for the developer who's installing it, it's a much better experience. We are obviously going to run into some problems for if you install like Flex Slider Module 1 and Flex Slider Module 2 at the same time, and they both contain the library, you'll have a conflict. But the use case, like the valid use cases for having 2 separate modules that do the same thing differently, is very slim. And I don't think that, our philosophy here is, 80% of sites aren't going to have 2 Flex Slider modules. So if you have one that is legitimately an add-on, it should require the parent one. If they're separate modules, you should choose one. And I think that for Backdrop 1, that being our policy, is realistic. Long-term, trying to figure out a better way to detect which version of library is already included and change them is, valid. That's why libraries module exists for Drupal, in part. But I don't think it's super urgent. So, Nate, can you read over that issue and see if what we just said is summarized there in any way that makes any sense to anyone new who might find that issue? And then maybe we can document it somewhere and then close the issue, just so that, or move it to 2.x or something, just so we can figure out, make it easier for people to know what to do when they run into this problem. Because we do run into this all the time.
Yeah, sure.
And it might also be worth having like 2 issues. Like one is like, what are we going to do with libraries in core? And the other one is, how should contrib deal with libraries? And then have them, referenced at the top of the issue or something, so that we can make it clear. All right, and then Luke also had a question about, he's going to be doing a backdrop talk on Monday, and he wanted feedback. Haven't read your comment here yet.
Well, it's just I posted in the Reddit group, basically just that, my proposed agenda for my talk on Monday. And basically, I'm just going to install it and be like, look, it's mostly like Drupal 7, except for, here's Layout Manager and here's CMI, which I'll demonstrate. So sometime between now and then, I have to learn them. Now, that's actually a thing. Nate, I thought I saw like a fairly recent video there that you demonstrated Layout Module, but when I search for it, I can't find it. So did I see that? Or
I think we just have an old one, but we were talking about just a day or 2 ago making a new one.
Yeah, there isn't a new video on layouts as far as I know. At least I haven't done one. The only one I had was before Backdrop was even released. I had that preview.
Yeah, does it still work the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same. Like If you watch the video, you'll know what it does. But I think like just playing with it is probably enough to figure out how to do things. I mean, there's some kind of concept things that we were just talking about this yesterday. People who come to layouts from Drupal have very strange ways of solving this problem because that was the only way you could solve this problem in Drupal. And so sometimes people's experience will thwart them in their interaction with layouts module because they'll be like, oh, I know how to do that, but you don't know how to do it because you had to do it differently in Drupal. But I think people who are new who come to layouts will be like, oh, I get it because it's simple and straightforward. But Drupal people have never had to solve this problem in a simple, straightforward way before, so it's a little tough.
I mean, that's why I'm hoping to sort of spark some discussion and kind of, you know, see what I know, see what we know, and see if there's like other stuff there that people come up with. So I want to open that wound and see what happens.
One thing that I would recommend for your talk, if you can, is find a way to demonstrate CMI. Like if you can have either two versions of a local site or a local site and a remote site, and find a way to like export config from one site and import it into another one. I think Nate and I did this at a live demo in a session for the 1805 Developer Conference. And I mean, you only had one site, right? You just exported the code, changed something, and then imported it back in. So that might be another way to do it, Luke, if you can't have two sites. But using the user interface for CMI to export and import, I think, is going to blow people's minds. So that would be a good place to start. I mean, if they've seen Drupal 8, they've seen something really similar. But I think doing the same thing with Backdrop would be compelling.
Yeah, that was sort of how I was going to create, you know, two local sites and do that. You know, export something, drag it in the Finder from one window to another, and you know, import in the other one and have that show up.
Yeah, you know, Matt Cheney has a great demo that he does, and he uses Pantheon. So he sets up, he spins up a Pantheon instance, and then on his local host configures all of the content types and everything, and then switches over to the Pantheon site and then just imports the entire config. So he sets up content types and fields and things like that on his local, and then he's like, oh, now I'm going to move this to Pantheon, and he just like imports the config, and it's like the entire site kind of gets replicated over without actually deploying any code, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So does he have a recorded video of that, or is it just something he's been doing in person?
Where was that? He does it for Drupal 8. He doesn't actually. I mean, his demo is Drupal 8, but I mean, you can do the same thing in Backdrop. So.
Well, I'll see if I can find his Drupal 8 demo. He's probably doing it right now in Columbia, right? Or,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's where it was. Yeah, that's it. And so it'll probably be on YouTube shortly.
All right. Oh, I've ripped off Matt before. I'll do it again. That's fine. All right. I think that I got enough. So, but I've got a posting Reddit if anybody wants to jump in and you know, make any suggestions. I would totally appreciate that.
Okay. Let's see. I guess that's it. Unless anyone has any other questions.
One point of order. Yeah. I just clarified in chat that the Backdrop CMS Sprint at MidCamp is on.
Sprint is on. I don't know if we're sponsoring it though.
Ah, gotcha.
I wanted to give them money, but I'm not sure they need money. So we'll
You'll be getting an email here, if not moments ago, in a few moments, clarifying some of that.
Okay. And then, yeah, let's see. Other exciting things going on?
We need to everybody wish Jen a happy birthday. It's her birthday today.
Happy birthday, Jen.
Thank you.
I had a question. What can I do at South by Southwest? I'll be out there with for the whole week with Matt Cheney. Him and I are doing a Drupal 8 presentation. What can I do to support Backdrop while I'm out there?
Tell people about it.
Oh, they can't stop me. Anything outside of what you expect me to do already? Anything special?
I wish we had like Backdrop T-shirts or something. I could send you a box, but we don't. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess just tell people about it, evangelize as much as you can. I mean, right now we're so new that very few people actually know about us, especially people outside the Drupal world. So if you can talk to people who are like, have you heard of Drupal? They're like, oh, vaguely. Like, have you heard of Backdrop? Because I think that, you know, we're still kind of under the radar for a bunch of people, and the fact that we're out means that anyone can try it. You can spin it up on Pantheon, you can launch a site. There's a bunch of cool stuff going on that people who, maybe WordPress fans might be interested in learning about. So
if you want to design and order it, I'll pay for printing and shipping of whatever you like.
Oh my goodness. Any designers on the call? Okay, we've got a call with Darius today. We have to make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So t-shirts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do
That'd
it.
be fabulous.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. Well, if there isn't anything else, then we should wrap this meeting. We will meet in IRC on Pound Backdrop. If you want to tweet at Backdrop, it's at BackdropCMS. You can find us on the internet, backdropcms.org. Yeah. We all hang out together all the time on these Google Hangouts every Thursday, so that's fun. And yeah, we'll see you all on the internet.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining. Bye.